Hi, I'm Bill Ogelsby. I'm an associate professor at the Robertson School and wanted to talk to you very briefly about a subject called gerrymandering. Now, gerrymandering may or may not be a term you're familiar with, but essentially it refers to when politicians are allowed to draw their own district lines, either to ensure their own reelection or in some cases to prevent somebody else from being elected. As a term, gerrymandering goes back to the late 1700s when a Massachusetts governor, whose last name was actually Gerry, drew a congressional district line that was so convoluted that people said it resembled a salamander. So they put his last name in together with the term salamander and came up with gerrymandering. Now, gerrymandering is an even bigger problem today than it was in the late 1700s because we have computer software today that is so progressive, so sophisticated, that it's very easy to draw district lines, down a given street, even around individual houses in such a way that the district they want to create can be ensured. Well, why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem, first of all, because having a district that's non-competitive leads to voter apathy. Another problem is that when you know the district is going to favor a given party, there's very little chance that you're going to have any competition from outside your party, from the other party. What you could have, though, is competition from within your own party in a primary. And what that tends to do is to take people away from the political center toward either the far left or the far right, depending on the party we're talking about. So that can create a problem as well. Now, there are two basic types of political gerrymandering. One is racial gerrymandering. We know the courts don't like racial gerrymandering. We had the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which actually demands that districts be drawn in such a way that they will allow people who are minority members to be elected in districts where they reside, okay? That's all well and good. The problem is that politicians sometimes will use something called packing. They will literally pack members of a minority group into one district. So while they may be insured or at least a greater likelihood of being elected from that district, there's much less likelihood that they will be elected in surrounding districts. So racial gerrymandering is something the courts don't like. There's another type of gerrymandering called political gerrymandering that courts have been much more hesitant to get involved with. Their logic is that gerrymandering is essentially a political process, or drawing district lines is a political process. And if in a given state we don't like the way we've set up to have political lines drawn, then we can change our laws to have a new way. But the court should not get involved, okay? In fact, in Virginia right now, we have a constitutional amendment on the ballot this fall for reform of our districting process, okay? What it would do is to create a new constitutional amendment that would establish a nonpartisan or bipartisan, essentially an independent commission that would be made up of both politicians and of private citizens. Now, here's where it gets a little crazy in Virginia. As you probably know, Republicans had control of the General Assembly up until the fall election of 2019. So prior to that time, when this whole effort began, Democrats were all in favor of redistricting reform because they weren't in power. They weren't the ones drawing the lines, okay? Republicans were opposed to reform because they were the ones that could do the gerrymandering. But as it became clear to them that they were about to lose power in the General Assembly, gradually Republicans started being in favor of redistricting reform in Virginia. And now that Democrats have in fact taken over control of the General Assembly, many Democrats are opposed to reform, okay? Because they now control the lines, the drawing of the lines. What they say is specifically that there's not enough guaranteed minority representation on the commission, that citizen members will be appointed by the politicians themselves. And they even point out that if whatever proposal the commission comes up with to the General Assembly, if the General Assembly cannot agree on that, that the final decision as to what kind of districts we'll have will be put in the hands of the state Supreme Court. And the state Supreme Court, at least currently, is mostly made up of Republican appointed members. So on it goes. And so there's now opposition from some Democratic members of the legislature. Now, those in favor of a commission say, look, the good is not the enemy of the perfect, that an independent commission will be a progressive means of reform. Supporters also point out that, we only get to do this redistricting process once every 10 years. Basically, a census is taken, as you probably know, in the first year of each decade. So in 2020, we've got a census going on that basically will inform us where people live. And on the basis of what we find out in 2020, there will be redistricting lines changed in 2021. That won't happen again for another 10 years until 2031. So unless it becomes a part of the Virginia Constitution this year, Democrats will have total control as to how the lines are drawn in 2021, and it'll be at least another 10 years before we can reform that process. Now, if you'd like to know more about this whole process of gerrymandering, I know it can sound a little confusing, but you're going to need to vote on this in November, and it's your duty to vote on it. So let's be an informed voter. What you can do, you can watch an hour-long documentary that I actually produced on this subject for public television. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Gerry-rigged, and it's spelled, you can just go to YouTube and search it out. Search out Gerrymandering, turning democracy on its head. It'll be the first thing that comes up, and then you can be an informed voter so that when you get to the ballot box in November, or if you vote early, you'll at least make yourself an informed voter.